Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It. We're learning Kesubos, Daf Nun Vav, number 56. I have the honor of having a special guest. You might recognize him from one of the earlier shiurim, about 10 months ago. Hi, Dad. How are you doing?
Very good. Very happy to be here in Eretz Yisrael Kodesh.
Uh, what's the occasion that brings you to Israel?
I heard of
He's coming for the elections. That's really what he's coming for. He's campaigning for Netanyahu.
I heard of this wonderful daf and the Ian with Ben Sion and all the other wonderful tidbits of Torah that you put out every day, and I had to see it in person.
Well, Dad, 40 shiurim a week. I mean, is that incredible or what?
It's fantastic.
Is that even being done anywhere else in the world?
I don't
Let
know.
alone on YouTube. Forget about any brick and mortar yeshiva.
Tremendous Kiddush Hashem.
Unbelievable.
Beautiful.
My father came all the way to Israel just to see it in person, what it's like. He experienced the hot weather in this room because there's no air conditioning. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, but the cool breeze of the wonderful Torah that's going on more than compensates.
Great. And it's a real honor to have my father here. He learned many years in yeshiva until he went to college, right?
Well, I learned in college too.
You learned college too.
I went to YU.
And then you went to, where'd you go?
Then I went to law school.
You went to law school. What type of lawyer are you, Dad?
I try to be an honest one.
Did you listen to the shir the other day when I talked about the lawyers? Orchei Dayanim, remember Rabbi Yochanan?
I don't think so. But
Oh, there's a Gemara a couple dafim ago that Rabbi Yochanan, one of his relatives didn't want to pay so much money for the Kesubos for one of the widows that remained to get nourished from the estate. So he told him for refuah, for the medical bills or the chronic conditions. So he said, pay the doctor up front so you shouldn't have to pay her for the rest of the year. And then he felt bad about what he said because he said, Asinu atzmenu k'orchei dayanim. He said, we made ourselves like lawyers. You don't remember this Gemara?
now it's bringing back.
Asinu atzmenu k'orchei dayanim. We made ourselves like lawyers. So the Gemara says, what did you think originally when he told him? The Gemara said, "Mipsarcha lo salim." You have to try to help out your relatives. And then he said, no, Adam Chashuv Shiny. He was an important person, maybe the Gadol Ador. So he thought it was better. So I discussed then about whether being a lawyer is a good profession or not a good profession. What does yours say after many years, 40 years you've been practicing law? What do you have to say about the profession of law?
I think it's like any profession. There are its positive aspects and, of course, the not so positive.
What's that joke they say that about 6 feet under? What's the joke? I try to recall that they were saying.
I may not recall the exact words of it. Something like where can you find good lawyers? About 6 feet under.
I mean, they're dead.
Exactly.
So you can't find good lawyers. That's basically what he's saying. You can't find good lawyers. But actually, the law that you practice, real estate law, is pretty much free of the problems that criminal law, or torture or something like that, litigators, because the reason I was explaining that it may be bad to be a lawyer is because you might have a client who wants you to represent them, and based on the facts that he's telling you, he's the one either guilty in a criminal case or he's guilty in litigation. He owes someone money and he wants you to represent them and basically convince the court that he's not guilty, right? Right? I assume that, right? I'm sure that happens a lot, right? I'm saying a lot of profession. That's probably why they say it's not an honest profession, because you basically have to lie on someone else's behalf.
Well, I think it's also the way the American system of law is set up, as opposed to which may not necessarily be the case. We're talking about halachic law, and the Torah law, because the American law is based on the adversarial concept of justice. That each side is basically the representative of, each lawyer represents its own client, and the truth will come out, even though the other one may not necessarily be asserting the truth. A jury or a judge will listen to all the facts and make the right decision based upon what the real truth is. So I think Torah law is more interested in actually pursuing what the real truth is, not just by having two people argue, but by, the ultimate truth being the goal.
Okay. Well, you'll make of it what you want to make of it. I don't really. I mean, obviously, I think you're just saying more the technicalities in American law, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's an adversarial system. And, each side has to prove its point and hopefully convince the jury, even if they know that that's not the truth.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's start. 5 minutes in, I give myself 5 minutes to speak with my father. How often is my father here? All right. Let's start from the top of Nun Vav Min Aleph. I know I did this yesterday, but my father wasn't here. El Tarvayu, the top word, Nun Vav Min Aleph, 56a. El Tarvayu Azi Basar Umdina. Really, Rav and Rav Nassan go both follow circumstantial evidence. Manda Omar Halacha Shap. The one who says Halacha follows Relezim and Azariah. You mentioned Relezim and Azariah was the one who says that we understand that the intention of a husband, when he writes an Kesuba Tosefes, he writes extra money for his wife, we understand that he only wants to give it on condition that he gets married to her, not if he were to die or become divorced after the engagement before the marriage. So the one who says Allah is like Azariah makes sense. Here also, we have circumstantial evidence of his mindset. They would say no, really, that like the Tanakhama says, even Mina Erisin should be entitled to the Tosefes Ksuva extra money because they're more fond, and oftentimes people are more fond of their bride before they get married, during the engagement period. After they get married, you lose some of that romance. So for sure, you would want to give it to her, even Mina Erisin, the extra money that he promised her. Yasir Rav Chanina committed to Rav Yana. Rav Chanina sat in front of Rav Yana. The Kamar Halacha Rabazim and Azariah. Who does Halacha follow? Like he says, Halacha is like Rabazim and Azariah. She's not entitled to the Seves Ksuva unless they actually get married. Amalei Po Kari Karach Labara Ein Halacha Rabazim and Azariah. When he heard this, he said, "It's exactly the opposite. Go tell everybody outside. Halacha is not like Rabazim and Azariah. She would be entitled even from an Erisin." Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi Mishum Rabbeinu Halacha Rabazim and Azariah. He says no. The Halacha does follow Rabazim and Azariah. Apparently, they wanted to make sure that everybody knew the Lacha was like Relezim and Azariah. Rav Nachman, before he was quoting Shmuel, his own opinion, Amar Ein Lacha Relezim and Azariah. Lacha does not follow Relezim and Azariah. Ben Hardai Mishmei Rav Nachman Amri Halacha Kareb Elazar. Nardai were people from Narda, which was the place of Shmuel. They said the name of Rav Nachman, the Lacha is like Relezim and Azariah. Avgad Dalat Rav Nachman Amar Koldain the Doin Relezim and Azariah. Haki b'haki the heavy. Elazar was so adamant about his position. He says any judge that judges like Elazar and Azariah, he should have the following curse. The Gemara doesn't say what the curse is. Afilu haki halacha Elazar and Azariah. The Gemara states halacha follows Elazar and Azariah. Halacha l'maisa. Right? You want to know practically what to do. Karel Elazar ben Azariah. She's not entitled to the extra money unless there's actual marriage. Boyin Ravin asked the following question: Nichsa l'chupa v'lo nivola. Right, we mentioned that they have to actually get married. That's the halacha l'maisa. According to Elizabeth and Azariah, they have to actually get married for her to get that Tosefes Ksuva. They go under the wedding canopy, right? But they didn't go back to their house or hotel, and they didn't have a bia. They weren't together yet, right? And the husband either died or there was a gerushin before then. The mere fact that she went under the wedding canopy with him, and they had the Sheva brachos, right? I'm sure they call my father to get one of the Sheva brachos, right there. Your ceremonial Sheva brachos. My father does a good Sheva brachos. What's your favorite bracha in the Sheva brachos? You get a long one. What's that, seventh one? The long one?
It's the seventh one.
Yeah, my dad's got chazonos. He does chazonos. He's a chazan sometimes, my father. So, the fact that they stood under the wedding canopy together is enough for her to acquire the Tosefes Ksuva. Ochibas bia koner. They actually have to consummate their marriage. Tashma. Tanya of Yosef Shelo Kosev Ela Al Chibas Laila Harisha. The Brisa Rav Yosef taught is he only gave her the Tosefes Ksuva based on the fondness of the first night. If all you need is to go under the wedding canopy together, Hainu the Amar Laila Harishon. That's why it says the first night. If you'll say that really you need to actually be together with your wife, is it true that all couples are together, have sexual relations on their marriage night? Not so true. It's hard to understand this Gemara because usually couples do consummate their marriage on the first night of their wedding. I mean, it would be pretty sad if they don't.
But then we actually, cover that anyway with the yichud? Because we add yichud, so that's and it has to have two eidim, right, to give us enough time to theoretically have consummated the marriage. So whether they do or they don't,
You're saying the cheder yichud. The Gemara doesn't talk about cheder yichud over there.
I'm asking is.
Well, I think the reason they do the cheder yichud is because Shulchan Aruch says that that's one of the ways of nisuin, right? Because you're right. Because if they miyached, so they potentially could be together under those circumstances, but.
Because the converse would be true also, right? Because the converse would be true that if somebody saw a man and a woman go into, that's the Torah brings down, right?
Yeah.
And the door was closed and it was locked and they were in for a certain period of time that they could consummate it. Whether they did or they didn't, the assumption is that they did.
Well, the reason that they do the cheder yichud, the Shulchan Aruch says he has 5 opinions. Shulchan Aruch what's considered marriage, nisuin. Now, chuppah is one. It's not clear the yichud is because of another way of chuppah, or is the yichud because of the bia, right? The yichud, it serves 2 purposes. The chuppah basically, I always like to say chuppah doesn't mean, we have a canopy, which is basically a covering held up by 4 poles. But what I really think chuppah is, they have beds. They're called canopy beds. You know what a canopy bed is? A canopy bed, so. That's nisuin. Nisuin is the lashon of picking up, right? You're supposed to carry your wife over the threshold of the door, right? You carry your wife into the room. You're together in the bed. You're on the bed before you have the bia. That's the real chuppah, in my opinion. But we call it chuppah. That's it's like a metaphor that we do. A lot of times we do in Judaism things that are just metaphors for something else. That's what I believe it is. But anyway, it's a valid point. I mean, yichud. It's questionable whether the yichud, to what extent do we assume that when people are miyached, it's like they were together? I mean, do we assume for sure they're together? There's an assumption, but it's not necessarily. For dinei mamonis, you need a raya. It wouldn't be, maybe for isser v'heter, we can consider it to be that they together, but for dinei mamonis, right here, you want to extract from the husband sevas too, which is extra money. It could be $1 billion. Mentioned yesterday. Imagine Elon Musk. He married Amber Heard. It could be $1 billion. It could be. It's a lot of money, right? He's fighting over for Twitter. He's fighting for $1 billion. All right. So, so the Gemara says, apparently, bia. So the answer to the question is right. Bia on the first night. No, because the Gemara says a lot of times couples are not successful on the first night, and therefore they be together on the following night. It's not considered a bia, like Tosos and Daf Daled says, unless they actually break the hymen. So l'tamayich bia b'layla isa b'yamam alesa. What are you going to say? Bia, it says at night. Bia, you can't do bia during the day. Ha'amarava. Sorry, let's go back a second. The elamai chuppah. So you want to say what? The Bryce meant chuppah. Chuppah b'layla isa b'yamam alesa. It says chuppah at night. So chuppah you can do during the day also. Why do you have to do it at night? V'otamayach, according to your reasoning, bia b'layla isa b'yamam alesa. You can say the same question about bia. You can technically have bia during the day. Ha'amarava imhaya bayis afal mutter. Technically, even though it's not derech eretz, it's a proper thing to be together during the day. However, if you're in a dark house, you turn off the lights, you're allowed to. No, the Brisa speaks of normal circumstances, right? The bia v'layla, right? Normally bia is done at night. Ela chuppah kasha. Chuppah is a question. Somebody's chuppah not lo kasha. Chuppah is also not a question. Came with the stam chuppah lebia kaima, right? As I mentioned before, the real chuppah is going into the canopy bed, right? Which makes it easier for you to be together at bia. Orech ara kamashma the belayla. So therefore, it teaches you normally, just like chuppah. The purpose of chuppah is to help, to aid, make it a place that, or make you more ready for the bia. So therefore, it's normally done at night also. So the Gemara hasn't resolved the question. Let's say, even assuming that chuppah would be enough for her to claim the seventh Kesubos, let's say she goes under the chuppah. And she menstruates, right? In which case she'd be usher to the husband. They can't consummate the marriage that night. Right? If you say that it's the chuppah itself, the endearment of chuppah is enough for her to be kona the seventh Kesubos, maybe it's only chuppah that is royal labia, right? That you could consummate the marriage that night. Maybe it makes no difference. Take with the Gemara leaves it unresolved, but based on the Ein Mishpat, we see that chuppah lo chazil be if she does menstruate. In fact, it would not be good enough. But we do paskin that chuppah itself is enough for her to collect the Tosefes Ksuva. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rata Kosiv L'Psula, Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah, you don't need to have specifically 200 or 100. You could write, she could write, I'm being mochel, I'm waiving half of the payment, 100 or 50 for an almana. But so Rabbi Yehuda, the Kos and Shover, Rabbi Yehuda, obviously in this case, the reason, right, when she says she's mochel, she waives part of the ksuva payment, right? So the husband gets a shover, he gets a receipt, right, to prove, because next time she comes to collect it, she's holding the ksuva. So the ksuva says 200. Now she waived 100 of that, so he has a receipt. So that's what presumably we're talking about. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that we rely on writing a receipt? Right? It says in Baba Basra, when someone pays half of their loan, not a ksuba, regular loan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yachlif, he says you have to write a new shtar, right? It was $1,000 loan. You pay back $500. You have to throw away the old shtar, right? A new shtar, $500. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yichtov Lo Shov. Rabbi Yossi holds no. You could keep the loan documents. He'll get a receipt. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, right? Rabbi Yehuda's worried over there. You're going to lose the receipt. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Kishivarta Mitocha. Now here we're talking about where they actually in the ksuva they crossed out 200. They wrote 100. So therefore you can't lose it. Abaye Amar Afilat him Shein Shavarta Mitocha. Even if we're not talking where you crossed out in the ksuva, B'Shlama Hasam Vadai Para. Pare Dilma Mirchas Tavarta Umapik Leil Shtar V'Hadar Gabis in Achrida. The reason we're worried about writing a shover over there, a receipt, is you might lose it and I'll collect another time. Haka Vada Yavla Milsa Ba'alma Hida Amrle Inatre Natre Ilo Natre Iuda Afsana Natre. Here he didn't pay the money, right? She was nice enough to waive part of the payment. So, she's doing him a favor over here. So we're not so worried about him losing the shover. If he loses the shover, it's his problem. He should guard it. Abaye lo Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Abaye didn't give the answer of Yirmiyah, who says that you actually write in the ksuba, you cross out the 200, you write 100. Lo kasani shavartim mitoch. It doesn't say in the Mishnah that you cross it out. El Rabbi Yirmiyah might tell him Amar Abaye. Abaye seems to make a lot of sense. Where it says Gzera shover dahak atu shover da alma, because if we would write a shover here, then we would be inclined to write a shover, a receipt, in a regular loan, which would be a problem according to Yehuda. So the Gemara in first time with the kasvalei, the reason is that he wrote for her, right? Aval al peh lo, right? If she just verbally said, right? It says in our Mishnah that she wrote, I am being mochel 100, I'm waiving 100 dinarim, whatever the denomination is, whatever currency you're using. So she waives half of it. She wrote a shtar about al peh. If she just verbally said, I don't want half of it, doesn't work. Even according to Yehuda, Amai davar shemamamanhu v'shamino leRehuda damar davar shemamaman t'nal kaim. Verbally, if you make a stipulation, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though you're being mavatal something in the Torah, the tzno is kayim. The sanya, what's the bryce? The bryce is the omer l'isha re'ah mekudeshes li. He says to a woman, you're mekudeshes to me, I'm marrying you, amnashe en lecha alai sher k'tus v'ona. We learned, right, Amidoraisa, a husband has to provide for his wife 3 basic things. Shares the food, the basic needs of her food, ksus, clothing, and ona, to be together with her at certain times. Arez mekudeshes. Ray Meir says, no batal, Ray Meir. She's mekudeshes. Not his batal. You can't make a stipulation which is against the Torah. The Torah requires a man to provide these things for his wife. So to go ahead and stipulate against the Torah, your Tanai is batal, and you keep the Kiddushin is valid. He says these things, at least sharing ksus according to Rashi, share is, you have to pay, it's valuable. Food costs money, clothing costs money. Ona, Rashi says, is not something which is davar shavamamon, but I would like to assert, I'm going to talk about Inyo Ben Sion, we're going to talk about, I believe, Ona is also called davar shavamamon. Anyway, either 2 or 3 of these things, Yehuda says, that Tanai is valid. So even when he makes a verbal stipulation, it should be valid, even though he's going against the Torah. So the Gemara says, Kasav Rabbi Yehuda ksuba derabbanan. Yes, when do we say Hamasna Mashakasav Torah? When you stipulate against the Torah, it's Kayim. That's only when by Doraisa. Ksuba is derabbanan. It's only derabbanan. Sometimes the Chum felt it important to make their words even stronger than the Torah in order that the Rabbanan's words shouldn't be thrown in the garbage. The Rabbanan v'lo Abdullahu Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, Peiros. What are Peiros? Peiros, we learned that in exchange for him having the obligation to ransom her if she gets taken captive, he gets to eat the fruits of her field. If she has a field that she brings into the marriage, or she has anything, she has stocks or something like that, he would get the dividends. So, Hare Peiros Derabanan, Avdu Rabbanan Chizuk. Peiros are Derabanan. It's one of the takanos that the Chazal made, and the Rabbanan didn't make a chizuk. It's not Rav Yehuda Omer La'olam Hu Ochel Peri Peiros. This is a Mishnah later on. Rav Yehuda says he gets to eat the peiros, and also if she were to replant the peiros and create new trees, he gets to eat those. Until he makes a stipulation, he says he can mevatel, even though he has a right to it. He could say he wants to be nice to his wife. He can say, "I'm not taking the peiros or the peiros." He has to say that. The kaimalan on the top of November base, the kaimalan, the Gemara makes the maskana over there. The Gemara comes to the conclusion over there. My kosev Omer doesn't mean he literally writes it. Even if he says it verbally, right, it works. And that's the Rabbanan. So even by the Rabbanan, we don't see by the Rabbanan they made a chizuk, right? He's master mashkaz b'torah, master kasha that the Rabbanan said this is how it has to be. He says I don't want the Rabbanan's takana. It works even by the Rabbanan. Amar Abaye answers the chol yesh ksuva. Everyone has a ksuva. Everyone gets a ksuva. Below the chol yesh peiros. Not all women are wealthy. They're bringing in fields, or they're bringing in stocks, or they're bringing in cattle, or whatever they have. Any possessions they're not bringing into the marriage. Milsa the shchicha avdu b'rabbanan chizuk, something which is common. Ksuva applies to everybody. There they made a chizuk. Milsa the lo shchicha lo avdu b'rabbanan chizuk. However, when it's not something which is common, the Rabbanan didn't feel the need to strengthen it because it didn't happen so often. Ari chamorim. So the Gemara asks on this chamorim. The case of donkey drivers, the shchichi, it's a case which happens a lot. But of the Rabbanan chizuk, what's that case? It's none. The Mishnah says, you have donkey drivers. People actually, I guess they wouldn't, in some parts of the world, you still have donkeys, people on donkeys. I think the Bedouins still use donkeys here in Israel. I don't know. They come into a city, they're selling to from people. Now, Chadash is Asr min Torah. You can't eat things that are grown from this year's crop before Tet Zayin Nisan. But he testifies that his friend, who's also selling his produce is Yashan. My produce is not taken off Shumas and Ma'ishos. My friend's was. Einem Monim. So the Rabbanan said we don't believe them. We assume they're probably trying to do a trick between them. Yehuda Omer Ne'monim. Yehuda says, and this, the focal point of this discussion is Rabbi Yehuda. He says we believe him over there. That's their Rabbanan over there, right? Because we're talking about Safek Shumas and Ma'ishos. Ama Aretz. Right, we're not sure if we took off Shumas and Ma'asos. So the Rabbanan made an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's called Demai. The whole Masechta about it. We're not sure what it is, so you can't eat from it before you take off Shumas and Ma'asos. So therefore, the Chamim, Rabbi Yehuda says they're Ne'emanim, and we rely on their words over there. Why don't they make a chizuk l'divrayim? Why don't they strengthen their words? Amar Abaye, vad l'divrayim avdu Rabbanan chizuk, safek l'divrayim avdu Rabbanan chizuk. This is basically a repetition of the Gemara in Shabbos, Naf Chav Gimel, that Abaye says, when it comes to something which is sure, right, like a ksuva, he surely owes her money. They made a chizuk. Safek divrayim. The whole concept of demai, we're not sure. It could be the Amar took off Shumas and Ma'asos, so they didn't make a chizuk in that case. Rava Amar b'demai kilo. Rava says, he argues in Abaye. He says Abaye holds most Amaratzim don't take off Shumas and Ma'asos. Rava holds most Amarats do take off Shumas and Ma'asos, which is basically a rov, which is a majority, which is a ruba de leisa kamam. It's a strong proof. It's a good enough proof. He says the whole concept of Demai is only a chumrah derabbanan. It's not really even a suffix. It's a chumrah derabbanan that were machmir. So therefore they felt the need to make it. They didn't make a chizuk with Yivraim in that case. Reb Meir Omer called poches. Reb Meir says in the Mishnah, argues on Rabbi Yehuda, anyone who, even if she waves part of her ksuva, they can't be together. You need a full ksuva. So when it's called poches afilu b'tana, even if they made a tanai, halma kasavar tano batal. You see what, right? Call a poches. In any way that she diminishes from the ksuva, even if she verbally said, I don't want it, or he made a stipulation that I'm not giving it, we see that tno batel, the isla, the tanai is batel, and she does get the entire amount. So the reason he doesn't allow them to be together is because she, Remeir holds the Tanai is batal. Your master kasher b'Torah, you go against the Torah, right? But you still get it. The reason that it's not you can't live together, even though she has the full ksuva, is because she thinks she doesn't have the full ksuva. She's not somech das, and therefore bilas or bilasnus. It's like promiscuity. It's like they're not actually being together in a bond of marriage. But Remeir holds Amar kol master kasher b'Torah Tanai batal. Habdu Rabbanan Tanai kaim. He says only by Torah, by divrei Torah. Right? Then your Tanai is batal. The Rabbanan, Ksuva is the Rabbanan, according to most opinions. At least part of the Ksuva, part of the guarantee of the 200 or 100 is the Rabbanan. So therefore, he should hold this no kayim. It's mashma from the Mishnah. He holds no batal. The Maran says Meir ksuva daraisa. Meir is like the opinion, and we saw in Daf Yud. Rishon Gamliel holds that ksuva, all the aspects of ksuva are midaraisa, and therefore it makes sense what he said. Tanya Meir Omer kol apokas ksuva masayim olamana mana imana harezu bilas nus. Right? You can't live with a woman if you don't have a ksuva, full ksuva. Yosi Omer Rasha. Yosi says you're allowed to have less, or not a ksuva at all. Yehuda Omer Ratza kosev l'psula shtar shel masayim. He kosev es lo is kabaltim chamana. Right, like we saw in the Mishnah, right? Sounds like Rabbi Yehuda says that she could waive half of the ksuva, which would be 100 for the psula and 50 for an almana. So the Gemara asks, "Savar Rabbi Yossi Rasha?" Rabbi Yossi holds you can just waive the entire ksuva. Raminu ain't osing ksuva yishum ataltlin. In neitikana olam, we learned yesterday that ksuva can only be collected from real estate. If a woman wants to collect her ksuba, she doesn't collect it. They made it takana d'rabbanan, even though normally a balchov, someone who is owed money, can collect from the debtor. He can collect movable objects. He can go to take his kitchen table. He can take his golf clubs. He can take anything he wants. By ksuba, they didn't allow him to do that. And they tikkun olam. They had to fix something. I'm going to see in a second what they wanted to fix. Amar Rabbi Yossi v'chima tikkun olam. What is this tikkun olam? Yesh bazu. The reason movable objects are not good to collect the ksuba is because the woman's not happy with collecting from movable objects because they have no fixed value, and they go down in value with inflation. Movable objects go down in value, especially if they're used. Tanakama, so the Gemara interjects. The Gemara doesn't understand the brisa. Tanakama nami ein osin kama. What is Rabbi Yossi arguing on Tanakama? Ela lav hachikama. What does the brisa mean to say? Tanakama holds you can't use movable objects to collect the ksuva where he didn't accept responsibility if the objects that he set aside were lost or damaged. About kibul al osin, then you could technically do movable objects to collect the ksuva. Also, Rabbi Yossi l'meimra kibul al-achrayas amai osin. He said even if you're makabel achrayas responsibility if they get lost or damaged, but ksuva no poksin. Even if she collects those movable objects that he set aside, they'll depreciate in value, or she's not going to want them. So you see from this brisa where there's a chance movable objects might not go down in value, they might not be used, they might not go down in value, there might not be inflation. Rabbi Yossi's worried. So here she's saying I don't want either part or all of my ksuva, and shouldn't be worried over here. She's not going to want to be married to the guy. And where it says haki hashalas, there's a difference. Lo yada the tachil, right? There she doesn't know. She's not so mechdas. She doesn't feel comfortable with the marriage. Because she's not sure, right? When you have stock in the stock market and you look at stocks, you're never sure if the stocks are going to go down, right? You're always afraid to look at the ticker, to look at the stock market. It might go down. Here she expressly says, I don't want the entire ksuba. She knows full well what she's doing, so she understands. I'm okay being married with this guy for less than the ksuba. However, in a case where movable objects, where you're never sure it's going to go down, people worry about that, right? People worry about, their possessions, especially stock market, where things can go up and down very quickly. People worry about those more. That would be the conclusion of today's daf. Did you enjoy that?
Very much.
Was it a good share?
Very much. Trying to make through the jet lag that
you gotta
that
go
I
sleep.
went through. But
did you learn the daf on the plane at all, or you didn't learn that?
No. I learned it. I actually did it. I did it the morning that we left.
Let's show everyone your. What do you have here?
Well, these are my Xerox pages from my.
So did you Xerox all the pages?
No, I didn't. I bought the soft cover edition.
Because
I know I'm going to be here for the 3 weeks.
Okay.
And this way, I just supplemented it. Somehow, it didn't coincide. I was off by 3 days, so I only.
So you have 3 days of Xerox.
And then I'm back on my soft cover, which is very light.
Looks like you got some notes here. What are these notes?
When I Xeroxed it cut off a couple of words. So I want to be true to the game because every word of Torah is important, right?
These are the words of a lawyer over here. You see these words? This is how a lawyer writes over here.
If we're going to do it, we do the job, we have to have it all.
You got to do it the right way.
It may not all absorb, but it has to be there.
All right, thank you for joining our shir today.
So happy to be here with my son.
Yeah.
He's doing such a wonderful job
if you want
in being, Moser Torah to giving Marbus Torah. Giving Marbus Torah to the world in so many different ways. I'm so proud of him, and you should go from chayil to chayil and be successful in all your endeavors.
Amen. It's a big blessing.
Hope
Thank
to see you again soon.
All right, bye.